Welcome, everybody, to our advanced workshop. This month, we're going to be talking about a holistic approach to restoring gut health. Thank you for everybody who is tuning in. This topic is near and dear to my heart and my gut specifically, because I've gone through my own issues as I have been diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune condition, and that has a big impact and often an origin from the gut. And as you'll understand more by the time we're done, it is very connected to your immune system as well. So again, welcome, and I hope this is valuable to you and that you get a lot of practical advice as well as insights into other avenues that we can explore down the road. So who of you who are listening or watching have any of these symptoms of poor gut health? Heartburn, acid reflux, gas, bloating, nausea, abdominal pain, constipation, or diarrhea, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis. Those are both conditions, autoimmune conditions of the intestinal tract, or other autoimmune issues, joint pain, fatigue, brain fog, heart palpitations, or skin rashes. For many people who have autoimmunity, they can have any one or all of those at different times. And it can be quite disheartening. And you think, well, is that a separate issue? Should I see somebody for each one of those conditions, or should I have a separate medication for each of those conditions? And oftentimes that is exactly what we get. So if you go to the conventional medical doctor, the solutions, as you know, are often medications or pharmaceuticals that address each of those issues. So if you have heartburn or acid reflux, what are you going to get? Typically, you're going to get an antacid to shut it down, to lower the acid level. If you have gas or bloating, well, you're going to get an anti-flatulent or advice to avoid legumes or FODMAP foods. FODMAP foods, there's a whole list of high FODMAP, low FODMAP. We can get into that another time. Nausea, if you have nausea, well, you're going to take an anti-nausea pill. Abdominal pain, something like a pain reliever, maybe a digestive tea that has something like ginger or chamomile. If you have constipation, you'll take a laxative. If you have diarrhea, you take an antidiarrheal. If you have Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel, or inflammatory bowel disease, you might take an immunosuppressant, which the choice there is to suppress the whole immune system, to shut it down, to keep it from attacking and damaging that intestinal tract further. Joint pain, you take pain relief. Fatigue, get some rest, or get some caffeine in you in the morning to fire you up. Brain fog, maybe you need some more focus, something like an ADHD medication. Heart palpitations, well, I haven't heard too many advice recommended for that unless you have something like AFib, atrial fibrillation, which can often lead to like an ablation of the nerve that stimulates your heart. Skin rashes, steroid creams. That's again to shut down the immune reaction at the skin level. But all these things can relate to gut health. And unfortunately, these are all outside in solutions, strategies that really do not get at the root cause. They're all just basically, I look at it as like putting a finger in the dam, and the water behind the dam continues to rise and it's creating cracks. Water is springing through those cracks, leaking through those cracks. And then what we're doing is just plugging up the holes, and we're not addressing the rising water behind the dam. And as you look at that situation, you're thinking, well, eventually that's going to lead to more cracks, and bigger health problems down the road. So the gut-brain connection. The gut and the brain are connected via the vagus nerve and the spinal nerves. Some of you have heard of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve comes from the Greek word for like vagabond, basically the origin of the word vagabond. It's a wanderer. You see all these blue arrows. I outlined it on this poster. You can see from the brain stem up in the neck, you can see that green nerve wandering down, leaving off a branch to every single organ. The vagus has what's called parasympathetic or rest and digest control of our nervous system. And it gives a ton of feedback up to the brain about what's going on in all of our organs, and specifically the gut. But you see the red arrows. Those are the arrows that point out places where I, as a chiropractor, would adjust. and can impact through my chiropractic adjustments the gut, because in the upper arrow, the one at the base of the skull, that one can impact the vagus nerve more directly. And then the middle three, those address those nerves that branch off and go straight to the gut, liver, pancreas, intestines. And then the lowest most arrow down by the tailbone, that one goes to reproductive organs, large intestines, and the bladder. So just to give you an idea of how the nervous system has a lot of layers and a lot of different ways to influence it. And it's not just one thing. But I do want you to understand that gut-brain connection is predominantly made by the vagus nerve. So you have output from the brain to the gut and sensory input from the gut up to the brain, telling the brain what's going on. The gut has 100 million neurons, and it has its own branch of the nervous system called the enteric nervous system. The microbiome that lives within the gut, that's the ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, viruses. There's 500 trillion organisms that live there. And just for comparison, our own human cells, number around 50 trillion organisms. So in effect, we are outnumbered 10 to 1 by the bacteria, fungi, and viruses that live within us and on us. And so the interesting thing is the gut microbes are in constant communication with the brain, affecting everything, affecting our emotions, our sleep, our metabolism, and our health. It is home to 70% of our immune system. And for many, this is very important. 95% of your serotonin is produced in the gut. And when that is produced, how is it communicated? By the vagus nerve. So what do we need? We need a healthy spinal pathway, and we also need healthy brain function to be able to incorporate that information into a better mood and better function from a serotonin point of view. Now, here's how our body works. If you look at the very bottom, we have lifestyle and environment. Those are the roots of everything that we have in our body, everything that functions. It's almost like it's a lifestyle and environment. Another analogy to the roots is like a keyboard on a computer. So here I am sitting in front of my laptop. If I was typing and programming on this computer keyboard, I am creating signals and information that is going to go up our sensory system. If we take it in via food, it'll go through our gut and that sensory system. Otherwise, it'll go through our five senses. From our gut and our senses, the information is fed into our spinal cord. And from our spinal cord, it goes up the spine into the brain. And then the brain processes that information and then comes up with an output. Okay, what are we going to do with that environment, with those signals, with that information? We're going to communicate to our systems, our organs, and our cells. So that is how our body works, that whole system. Our gut is a huge interface, like a big satellite dish saying, what's going on? And our nervous system is right on the edge, just behind one cell layer of the gut lining, the cells that line the gut. Our nervous system is one cell layer back, sensing and detecting what's going on out there and what's going on in our gut and then on that lining. But what happens is we encounter stress. And if you've ever given a talk and you weren't prepared, if you've ever given a presentation on stage or a performance and maybe you acted in a play or you sang in a musical or just gave a speech at a wedding or something and you were nervous, what happens to your gut? You might get butterflies. You might have to run to the bathroom. Might have all kinds of different issues in the acute moment, like right away. But in the long run, if we have chronic stress, what that does is it starts to shut down those unnecessary systems in our body when it comes to survival. Digesting our food that we just ate is a lower priority job compared to running away from an attacking tiger or a mugger in a dark alley. If we're being chased down by somebody, we don't need to spend any energy on that digestion. We also don't need to spend energy on our immune system. Like whatever is invading us or trying to take us over or infecting us, put that on hold. Hold on, survive, and then deal with it once our system comes back into awareness that, okay, the threat is gone. So realize that the brain and the gut are constantly in communication, and it's not just the gut, it's the immune system and also the other side of our body, which is if we're in fight or flight, we need to get away. So our muscles get all the energy and resources in fight or flight situations, and not the gut and not the immune system. So it's really important to realize that chronic stress, if you're living in a state of chronic stress, your gut will start to shut down progressively and increasingly so, such that it will create problems in terms of the whole system, from creating enough saliva, creating enough digestive juices like stomach acid, pancreatic enzymes which break food down, liver, the liver's ability to detoxify, and then our colon function and the composition of our microbiome. So this gets affected. It's really profound and really crazy. But what are some of the common causes of gut problems? If you look at the bottom again, so instead of lifestyle and environment, I replace that with these antibiotics. If you're exposed to antibiotics anytime in your lifespan, it will wipe out a certain population of your bacteria, your healthy bacteria. And oftentimes we're getting broad spectrum antibiotics. And unfortunately, as you probably have heard, there is overuse of antibiotics in our medical system, such that we have created antibiotic resistant strains like MRSA and other bacteria that can be devastating because we run out of antibiotic options to treat the things that are really necessary. Plus, these bacteria that would have caused a mild infection now become bacteria that have become antibiotic resistant, that are now a bigger threat to us. Now it's a more refined pathogen that can wreak real havoc on our body and our health. The other issue with antibiotics is if you have antibiotics, if a child has exposure to antibiotics in the first year of life, a study showed that you are 4 times as likely to be asthmatic later in life than if you did not have antibiotics in your first year of life. That is huge. And what it does is it shifts our immune system. Long story, a lot of detail. We'll go into that in another talk, but it shifts our immune system into this one of where we have a bigger reaction to allergies and allergens in our environment, such that we have more of that type of allergy response and more asthmatic response. And the other part of taking antibiotics is it shifts our whole composition of our gut microbiome. If you think about your lawn, you have a really beautiful green grass in your lawn that is thick and lush. And what if you peeled off that layer, you took off all the sod and you exposed just dirt? What do you think is going to happen in the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks? What's going to be growing there? Will it be that beautiful green grass? Unlikely, right? What's gonna grow first? It's gonna be all the opportunists, all the little weeds that are floating around all the time. You don't even see them necessarily. Sometimes you see dandelion seeds floating around, but most of the time you don't see them. What's going to grow are all the opportunists, all the things that grow quickly, respond quickly, but not like that deep-rooted sod of grass that was so thick it was protective of everything, of keeping other things out. So when you take antibiotics, you're like ripping the sod off of your lawn. And when that happens in your gut, you're vulnerable. Other things can grow, and often they do. And we end up with a microbiome that is out of sorts and the ecosystem's out of balance. And that can set us up for future health problems, not just asthma, but just in terms of how our overall body works. I want to read this quote for you from this book called Brain Maker by David Perlmutter, MD. He says that this Russian-born biologist, a Nobel laureate, Elie Mechnikov, he made a stunning link between human longevity and a healthy balance of bacteria in the body. This is in the 19th century, mind you. So he confirmed that death begins in the colon in the 19th century. Who was thinking about that? He said, since his discoveries, this is what the book says, since his discoveries made at a time when bloodletting was still popular, scientific research is bringing more and more credence to the notion that up to 90% of all known human illness can be traced back to an unhealthy gut. And we can say for sure that just as disease begins in the gut, so too does health and vitality. So that's a powerful paragraph there that I think really emphasizes how important it is for us to be thinking about gut health as a main place to put our attention, in addition to our nervous system, because the way our gut works, it communicates with the brain, and between the gut and the brain, they work together to bring us our body function. Now, I want to get into alcohol. Alcohol is something that can really impact how our gut health. It has been said that alcohol consumption moderately can increase longevity in terms of heart health. But I've also heard that alcohol consumption, the same amount that produces benefits for heart health, can also increase our likelihood of having intestinal cancer, colon cancer by up to tenfold. So that's not often discussed in those conversations. Sugar consumption. Sugar is like fertilizer for yeast and fungus. If we have too much sugar, too much carbohydrate in our diet, we're going to grow too much yeast and we'll have a higher tendency to be congested and lethargic. Look up candida. That's something that can be addressed by um, looking at our sugar consumption and getting added sugars out of our diet. Glyphosate. What is that? That is basically the main ingredient in the herbicide Roundup. Roundup is sprayed everywhere. I think it's billions of pounds are sprayed annually. I don't know the exact figure, but it's something startling. Let's not worry about that right now, but let's worry about our exposure to it. So try to eat organic whenever possible. And why is it a big deal? Well, glyphosate promotes glyphosate exposure through our conventionally grown, non-organic produce. That glyphosate can promote leaky gut over time. So you think, well, why would I get leaky gut? Well, we're exposed to these herbicides, pesticides, insecticides on a continual basis. Even if it's a little at a time, it starts to make our gut inflamed and can lead to leaky gut. Junk food. I mean, junk food is going to feed the unhealthy bacteria. It's going to feed the yeast. It's going to feed other bacteria and organisms living there. And that's going to lead to just poor nutrient availability. A whole bunch of things could be said about that. Understanding gut symptoms. We talked about chronic stress. When we have chronic stress, it lives in our nervous system. It's been said that we live our lives through our nervous system. Well, if our nervous system is in chronic stress, like I said before, we're going to shift away from gut, from digestive and immune functions, and towards survival. And when that happens, first of all, we're going to produce lower stomach acid. What will that lead to? Well, we won't digest our food properly. We'll have indigestion. As you can see that big arrow going to the left, indigestion, heartburn, acid reflux. Sometimes heartburn and acid reflux is because of too low stomach acid. You can do a test for this. I can lead you through that test to figure out which one are you. But too often, every time somebody has heartburn, they're immediately given an antacid or they're given something like Nexium to shut it down. But it's not always the case that it's too much. Many times it can be too little. That food sits around in our stomach, doesn't get broken down, and then we're starting to burp up what is still sitting in our stomach. Our nervous system, our the cue for the food particles to be broken down it's not coming, and so it just sits there, and that prevents that food from leaving the stomach, going into our smaller intestine, and continuing on its journey. So it just sits there, and we start burping it up, and we feel like, yeah, that's acid reflux, but it might be the other. Downstream, now we have undigested food particles that can lead to gas or bloating because we start to ferment these foods that have been sitting there for too long and also in particle sizes that are too large. We can feel nausea, abdominal pain, and then things like constipation or diarrhea because of the microbiome disruption. That can lead to leaky gut when we have the imbalance in certain bacteria, certain microorganisms that are living there. Now we can generate this leaky gut. And what does that mean? Well, there's a barrier. Imagine like a fence on the sides of the walls of the intestinal tract. And when that fence starts to have gaps in it, then undigested food particles that are normally too large to get through that fence start to break into our bloodstream. And then our immune system, that's always vigilant, looks at those particles and starts to freak out and says, well, these particles are the size of a bacteria. They're like, whatever, 5, 10, 100 times larger than they should be. And the immune cells start to label it as an invader, and we start to react to those foods after a while. Even further down, or yeah, further downstream from that, if that reaction isn't slowed down or reversed, we don't heal that leaky gut, we can start to have autoimmune reactions where, let's say gluten, for example, which is a common food that people react to. If we create an antibody to gluten, the amino acid sequence of gluten is very similar to the amino acid sequence in a thyroid cell. And in my case, because of my Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroid, I started to develop antibodies against my own thyroid. And one of the pathways that has been identified, or one of the theories, is that when you have leaky gut, you start to develop these reactions, and your body starts to go after everything that looks like that, that suspected invader. And in this case, if it's gluten, every time you have a gluten exposure, your body starts to go after everything that looks like gluten, and you have a flare up in your gland. In other people, it could be their joints, like in rheumatoid arthritis, it could be their brain in like MS. And people know, if you have autoimmunity, you know what a flare up is like. Something triggered it. And this is one of the many types of triggers. You can have joint pain, fatigue, brain fog, heart palpitation, skin rashes, systemic inflammation. And it doesn't have to be autoimmune, but it is often immune. And it would be a precursor to something downstream where the immune system gets further in disarray, and that can lead to autoimmunity. What is the journey from gut health to whole body health? So, when it comes to healing our gut, we're really addressing something that's fundamental to how our body works. First thing, I mean, I'm a chiropractor. I see this every day. For those patients who come in to see me, they're reducing their stress mode. They're restoring their rest and digest mode, which is the opposite. That's like the brakes, to the stress mode, which is like the gas pedal. So being able to press on the brakes in your body's function and go into rest and digest, it's something that chiropractic care facilitates. Why? If you remember that poster before, that second or third slide I showed you, all those different points, whether it's in your upper neck that influences the vagus nerve and can stimulate the rest and digest mode that way, or those middle of the thoracic areas where those nerves go to the stomach, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, and or the tailbone, the sacrum. Those areas stimulate the rest and digest mode in your nervous system, or they calm down the fight or flight response. Imagine that gas pedal being pressed every day by whether it's your mental stress, your emotional stress, your caffeine exposure, all those things, and we need to calm that down and restore it. That's what I do. I would be remiss if I didn't bring that up as a primary thing, because if you're in stress mode too much, you're going to be shutting down your gut, and all this advice is not going to be making a dent. Next, we need to analyze your metabolism and your systems. We do that through a questionnaire. We monitor your food intake, and through looking at that, we start looking for triggers, things that could be inflaming you, things that could be driving you into an inflammatory or gut health state. Next, we need to look at improving your eating habits to improve and promote good digestion, such as drinking water, like a good 16-ounce glass of water, 20 minutes before a meal to make sure you're hydrated enough to create stomach acid during the meal. Because if you're not hydrated enough, then the typical liter, and hear me, a liter of stomach acid and digestive juices is not able to be created because you're too dehydrated. So it's very important to be able to have that hydration to create enough stomach and digestive juices. But the other part is not to dilute your digestive process during the meal. If you want to sip a little water while you're eating just to help something get down your throat, that's okay. But the idea of having a glass of water or drinking fluids with your meal once you started eating is actually a bad idea, because now you're diluting the existing stomach juices, the digestive juices. You're diluting that process, and you're going to make your digestion harder and not work as well. So drink that water 20 minutes before the meal, and then wait about 2 hours until after you're done to drink, the larger amounts of fluid again. And make sure you're drinking the fluids steadily throughout the day. Don't just chug a 16 to 24-ounce glass of something, because think about like runoff on the with the rainfall. it won't soak in as well as a steady rainfall. Next, we want to perform some diagnostic testing. We call it functional diagnostics or functional diagnostic testing. Some of them, there's many that we could do. One of them is food sensitivities. Another is leaky gut. Another is looking for toxins. Another is looking at your microbiome composition. You could also look at what's called an oats test. That's an organic acid test. These are all things that I can order. They have varying different prices depending on what you're trying to do. But I don't jump into saying, hey, let's do all the tests under the sun unless we need them and unless we need to know. But if there are things that we can do without testing, then let's get after that. If there are things we don't know the status of and we're not quite sure what direction to go, then testing makes sense. It also makes sense in order to monitor progress. Next, from all this information, we can create a customized lifestyle, nutrition, and supplement regimen. We need to make sure it's customized to you. If you go and listen to something on Instagram or Facebook or find a podcast and they're saying that this is what everybody should be doing, anytime I hear somebody say everybody, I'm shaking my head. I'm thinking, you know what? It's not everybody because we're all very different. We shape our bodies through our lifestyle choices, and we start to go off. And my logo here has a tree. We start to go off on our own branch, our own limb. And when we get off on that own our own limb, we have created our own little ecosystem that, although we have commonalities with others, and there's a lot of people probably on that limb with you, you have to realize that you're going to need some unique guidance and unique shaping to get you back. There are common things that can help many, and there are some common things I'm sharing today. But just realize that having a guide that's an expert is really important to help you come back from some of these complex situations. Next, we need to replenish the digestive enzymes. Getting out of stress mode is key, but many people need to get some digestive enzymes back into their diet, especially as we age. The older we get, we start to produce less stomach acid, and we find it more difficult to digest food like we did before. It makes us not have the same appetite, and our plate looks smaller and smaller. When actually we start to lose some of that protein, lose some of that muscle mass, and we need to be feeding it. So that's something that needs to be concern as we age. We re-inoculate the good bacteria. Those are putting back the good ones once we have shifted away from feeding or fertilizing the bad ones. We've also removed or we've eliminated some of the bad ones. And lastly, we need to repair that gut lining so that we're not driving these food particles into our bloodstream like we did before. Next, okay, what are some best foods for gut health? Number one, digestive aids and soothing foods. Very simple. Some digestive aids are like apple cider vinegar. It's very popular. Some people just put like a couple of ounces of apple cider vinegar in a glass and dilute it with water so you don't have to taste that straight, acidic taste. And you can drink that once a day. Some people have that before a meal to help stimulate some of that acidity and support your stomach's production of acidity. And those who have inflammatory issues can benefit from like a ginger tea or a combination of ginger and turmeric, or just taking turmeric in a variety of forms, whether it's in a capsule. We sell one that's a supplement in a liquid form. It's liposomal, which means that it's fat encapsulated, which allows it to join in and enter the cell much more readily. It's something I find more effective. Next up, prebiotics. Prebiotics should be labeled as fertilizer. Whatever you consume in prebiotics, those are the things that will fertilize what you have. It will grow the bacteria that they target. So generally, it's high fiber. But what specifically? What type of fiber? Well, legumes are super high in fiber. Some people have difficulty with legumes. I'm one of them. What I found recently is that sprouting them is a great way to go to help you digest legumes more easily. How do you do that? It's a it's an easy process. You can look it up. I'm happy to help you if you want more advice. Psyllium husk, flax, and chia are all add-ons that you can put into your food, into your yogurt. Great additions for fiber, as well as omega-3 benefits. Asparagus, raspberries, onions, apples with their skin, banana, and quinoa are all really good high fiber prebiotic foods. Additional benefits for the gut now are the seeds. So if you're going to fertilize your lawn, that's the prebiotics. But if you want to overseed your lawn and promote the growth of the bacteria that you're looking to grow, you have fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt. Ideally get the full fat Greek yogurt, kombucha, and kefir. Try to rotate these and also rotate your supplements. I recommend taking a probiotic supplement, but don't take the same one forever. Try to rotate them in. You're trying to sprinkle in your exposure to different things so you create a nice, diverse microbiome ecosystem. Next, antimicrobial. So why would you want to have an antimicrobial, something that's like a natural antibiotic? Well, if you're one of those people with gas or bloating, you probably have something called SIBO. That's called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That means the bacteria are growing in the small intestine, which should be a sterile environment. They should be only growing in the colon, the large intestine, but once they start growing up in the small intestine, we have problems. We have more gas, bloating, and we can develop food reactions and problems. So in those cases, I have a formula called GI Synergy, which is high in oregano oil, but it has about 15 different things that knock down the unhealthy bacterial populations, as well as fungus, parasites, and yeast. Garlic is another really good antimicrobial. So those can be combined. You can use them just one or use both or do that more bigger formula like I was talking about. Now, this is a whole nother topic, but I think it's super important to touch on because when we're looking at cleansing your gut, a lot of people want to do gut cleanses once a year, especially like in January, after the holidays, or they just want to do them twice a year to keep their body healthy and clean because we live in a highly toxic environment. I think there's over 100,000 man-made chemicals at this point. And the last I checked, when it was like 83,000, I think they had said only about 1,000 of them have been tested for their impact on human health. So we have so many things out in our environment that we have to react to. I mentioned earlier glyphosate, which is ubiquitous. It's like almost everywhere. That is the main ingredient in the herbicide Roundup. But there are things like PFAS, which is a forever chemical. Those are like flame retardants. They're made by in military and industrial use. Now, when these chemicals get out in the environment, they don't break down. They're going to be there forever, and they have a big impact on our health. So we can go for a long time talking about endocrine disrupting chemicals. Those are like plastics, and those are also considered to be everywhere. And we just need to we have to have our guard up. We have to be aware and we have to be vigilant of what we're exposing ourselves to, and also diligent in terms of regularly cleansing and detoxing our bodies. So, one thing, increase steady water intake. The solution to pollution is dilution. I love that quote. That works for external environmental issues and our body. Just make sure you're steadily drinking water. Next, reduce toxin exposure. Like I said, if you can reduce how often your food touches plastic, if you can try to minimize any additives or chemicals that your foods are exposed to, that goes for conventionally grown foods. Go to ewg.org, ewg.org, that's environmentalworkinggroup.org. They have a list of what's called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. They publish those two lists every year. The Clean 15 don't necessarily have to be consumed organically because they're minimally sprayed or they're not sprayed. The Dirty Dozen, definitely buy those organic, and they update those lists every year. You'll be surprised to see which ones are on which list. Get your bowels moving with fiber. We just covered that with prebiotics. The bulk in your stool, right? So giving some mass to your stool will help to get those little scrub brushes of fiber going past your intestinal walls to clean off the things that have been accumulating there. Vegetables are the key. Crunchy vegetables are really important because they have a lot of fiber. Just emphasize those. If you make juices, don't leave the fiber aside. You need that. That's how it was meant to come. That's how you're meant to eat it. So make sure you consume that fiber with it. Exercise and sweat. So exercise will increase your metabolism, will increase your peristalsis. which is your intestinal movement. It will stimulate that movement through your intestinal tract, get things working better. Sweating will also promote metabolism. So, getting through the exercise as well as just sweating will help you detoxify through your sweat glands. And saunas also help you detoxify. Right now, there's so much research out there, some with conventionally regular saunas and also some with infrared. Both have their research backing them up. Try one or the other, but definitely do the exercise because that is an essential nutrient for human health. You can bind toxins like heavy metals by eating more cilantro. There are supplements that help you bind these heavy metals, but don't jump on a binder because if you just jump on a binder like charcoal is another binder, don't start taking those all the time when you eat because you'll be binding up the vitamins and minerals that you desperately need to run your body. So if you bind up toxins, because you're eating those binders with a meal, or you have charcoal with a meal, you're going to be binding up the things that you need to absorb from that meal. So watch out for that. Cilantro is okay, have that with your meal, but watch out on the binders. Promote liver function. Foods like beets, liver, kale, onions. I'm sorry, beets, kale, onions, and garlic. Eating liver is super healthy for you. That's a topic for another day. But beets, kale, garlic, onions are really healthy for liver function. And other things for liver function, avoid alcohol because alcohol starts to destroy the liver and it leads to things like cirrhosis of the liver and fatty deposits. Brush your skin. Use like a loofah sponge or some kind of sponge in the shower and gently brush your skin. That'll help stimulate the release of toxins and get toxins that are trying to be released through your pores. Um, Starve the unwanted bacteria and yeast. I don't mean you starve. Starve those unwanted bacteria and yeast and reduce their populations by denying them their food. So deny them the foods like sugars and alcohols and sweets because that's what they thrive on. The more sweets you have, the more sugar you have, the more yeast and those unwanted bacteria will be growing. Heal and seal the gut lining. That's a process. There's a 4R process that I lead patients through. We need to work on addressing the sequence, though. Before we heal and seal the lining, we need to make sure that we have addressed upstream the need to eliminate those toxins. And also, we calm down the inflammation and we remove the triggers all in a good sequence so that by the time we seal the gut lining, it is ready for it. And then feed and heal the cell. All of our cells, our 50 trillion cells, are our little workhorses. They're the ones who keep us alive. We are really just a collection of 50 trillion cells in a big bag called our body. And it's amazing that we coexist with these 50 trillion bacteria and other microbes that coexist with us, that feed us all this information. They help break down our food for us. They feed the gut lining, and then they help give us information that our brain needs in order to help us survive. And it's an amazing ecosystem that we're not brought up thinking of it that way. We're not brought up to think that these microbes can actually be good, but they are. We have 500 trillion of them, 10 times our own number. And then lastly, another topic for another day, but fasting. If you just want to fast on a basic level, go from dinner to breakfast, make it a 12-hour stint. Go from 7 p.m., you stop eating dinner, or 8, and then don't eat until 8 or 7, whatever that 12-hour window you choose. And then give yourself that 12-hour gap between eating. That's a very bare minimum start for fasting. You can extend that time. You have to be careful for women. Women respond differently when it comes to fasting. Women need to be cared for differently in terms of exercising. You don't want to exercise fasted, even though much advice has been given to do the same for men and women. Women don't respond the same. That's a subject we can talk about further offline. But in general, you can do the fasting on a small scale, say 12 to 14 hours every day. That's not such a big deal. But if you're a woman, you should eat before you work out. But men can typically handle a little longer fast on a regular basis and fast and exercise fasted. Women can handle a longer fast. It's just what are you demanding of the body after the fast? That's the key differentiator. But both sexes can benefit greatly from the longer fast, like the 1, 2, 3, and even longer fasts when we're trying to address inflammatory issues, address metabolic syndrome, address things like PCOS, or address things like metabolic imbalances that lead to obesity and other imbalances in our blood lipids, cholesterol, those kind of problems, and insulin levels and high blood sugar. So all of those can be benefited by shifting into periodic fasting. So this is a lot of information, so many directions to go and to cover with all this content. I wanted to give you this topic. I think it's super important for everybody. If you have questions and you're not a patient, schedule below. Reach out to us, schedule an appointment with me, come in, let's do an evaluation. Let's see how we can help. Use this QR code. And if you are a current patient, let's talk about it more. If you have questions, make a list of notes. You should get the replay if you're watching even now. I know there's a lot to unpack here, and there's still so much more to cover. But I really appreciate you being here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them now. But thanks again. I appreciate you and have a wonderful day.